Welcome to Let's Make a Game Platformer, episode 21. In last episode, I've added the lighting to the game. So we both have lighting from camera, light near the camera, and we also have lights within the scene here. I've noticed a bug here that after completing the game, when I start a new game, the score starts at the last value. But whenever I gain some score, it gets updated. That's because in the game UI system, gameplay UI system, whenever play is loaded, I should probably reset the score to be 0. So let's do that now. And we'll set it to 0. Okay. Okay, let me run it and test it. This fixed the problem. Okay, so we finish the levels. And we start with 0. Okay. Another thing I'd like to change is to improve the startup time of the game. This call to new reflections, the construction of this object, actually scans the class path. And we are doing it once for each context. So I'd like to refactor it so we do it only once by making the parameter into the method. And then do it just once here. That way we will be scanning all the whole class path only once, and then passing the results of the scanning to both of the context creation stuff. Let's make sure that everything still is working. Okay, no problem. Okay, so in this episode, I'd like to work on something that you may see in a lot of platformers, especially the most famous one. I'd like to add a block that when hit from underneath will spawn something on top of it. So I've added this beautiful stone piece with a bit of stars in it. And whenever it's going to be hit from underneath, it's going to spawn a star on top of it. So let's start with creating a new block for it. So let's call it star or by copying the stone one and block star or, and that's all I have to do. Now, because we want to do it only once per block, we have to, similarly to the exit portal, make sure that we create it with the block entity component, so it has to be called. And we also, so this will make sure that the entity for it's going to be created. We'll also create a new package here, spawning, and we'll have a component here, spawn entity system. So I register a system here and spawn entity component interface that extends component. And we'll have here a prefab name of what it has to spawn, and distance x, distance y, and distance z. That way we'll be able to specify where it has to be spawned in relation to this object, so to this block. That way we can say that the star has to spawn above it or below it or 3 blocks away or whatever we choose. We can define there. Okay, so I'll add this component to this star OR. So it's called spawn entity component. And the values, it has prefab name, and the prefab name for our star is star. And we want to spawn it above the block. So distance y is gonna be 1. And that's the value, yeah, distance y. Okay. So now up to the component. We have to also detect the player has actually hit it from underneath. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna copy. We have to add the rectangle hitbox component to the star OR and define the hitbox for this component as being. So let me check this component. It has translate X, translate Y, and translate Z. So what I'll do is just add a small rectangle underneath the normal position of the block. So let's do here translate X is 0, but translate Y is minus 0.1. So 10th of a block, and the height is 0.1 and width is 1. So this is basically a small rectangle of height of 10th of a block underneath the current block. Another thing we have to do is to make sure that this block, maybe let's just go with this for the moment. So this entity systems will be listening on an event which is sent by the hitbox system. And the event called is overlap event. Hitbox overlap event. So this spawn entity system will be listening for hitbox hit event entity rev, and we want to listen for spawn entity component. Maybe shouldn't we call it? Maybe let's name it to on overlap. Yes, spawn entity on overlap component. So let's call it this way. Update the prefab for the block, and okay, so let's first check that the other entity has component player. At the moment we'll just do it for player, but we can later on introduce that specific type of stuff has to hit it. So if it's a player that is overlapping the hitbox of this block, and the hitbox for this block is underneath the block once again, then what we want to do is spawn an entity above it. So we will need entity manager, inject and we will need prefab manager to be able to load the prefab. So we want to prefab manager, get prefab by name, spawn entity, get prefab name. And we want to entity manager, create entity from this prefab data, spawn entity, and we want to add a component with location to it. So create component location. Component. And we also need the location for this one. So it has to have a location as well. spawner location. So location will be set x spawner location get x plus spawn entity get distance x, and the same for y and z. Y and y here, and z and z here, and finally we have to save the changes to the spawn entity. And second thing we want to do, because when player jumps to this block, it will trigger it once, but it will keep triggering it until, well, it gets out of the hitbox. So what we have to do is, once the entity is spawned, we're for now consider it's going to be one time only, so every block will just spawn it once. So we have to, from this entity, remove component spawn entity on overlap and save changes to it. Okay, so let me create a new level for it. So I'll copy the first level, or maybe I'll copy the second level and call it sample 3. And let's make the gap a bit smaller, because you want to hit the block above it. And let's create another. So first of all, remove the stars, remove the torch, and let me add the platform above it. So -2 2 0 stone, and the same with with 0, and here at the position -1, 2 will create the star ore. So now other thing, we have to add another level to our sequence of levels, which is going to be sample 3. Okay, and let's give it a go and see if it worked. First level, second level, and third level. Yeah, so we can see it. I think we have to make it a bit higher. I won't be able to jump through this. So rather than here, let's do 3. Maybe for the time being, let's remove the first 2 levels for testing to make it faster to get to the last level immediately. Okay, but let's check if this worked. It did not work. Okay, let's see what's going on here. First of all, modify the level. Maybe move it 1 more up. Let's see. Of course, receive event. Let me just, for the time being, increase the size of this thing to 0.3. Okay, this has spawned. The star is actually spawned here, so at the start position, and the star is moved a bit, so we have to move the spawn distance of X by half. And make it smaller and get it a bit lower, so half a block lower, the blocks, so that we can hit them actually with our character. Okay, so the star is spawned where it's supposed to be. Appears to be only one star. Now I have to add platform here to be able to jump up and pick it up. So let me do that. So here we add a platform. At position 2 and 3. And 4 of height 2 at the height 2. Let's see how that looks. This is just for testing, so I probably make a bit better level later on. Just for now to be able to show something that, first of all, that I can pick up the star. And second of all, that, well, let me just show you what's going to happen. I can jump on it. Let me, so I have to bring it a bit lower. Maybe I'll just replace the platform here, move it up by 1.5 block. That's too high. Okay, let me make the gap smaller. And a bit lower. Okay, so it's working fine. Okay, that's it for this episode. Make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.